Thank you.
MacontheRock Concrete Conservative Hour. I'm sure you miss me. I'm sure you're tired of rock and roll. Just like we're supposed to be tired of Trump winning again. Well, guess what? He is. Little by little, he's feeding the pigeons. He's talking about Russia, driving them crazy, defending his son. Meanwhile, they're distracted. The left is distracted. They don't know what to do with themselves. All they can do is talk about Russia. Thank God for Donald J. Trump. I must admit, it was hard to fathom him beating my boy Ted Cruz, but now that he has, now that he's mentioned the solar panel wall that I suggested to Marco Rubio back in 2009, I'm really happy because it shows me that some people can think outside the box. Talking about the middle child, I'm the middle child. They did some studies there about what is it about us middle children. You know, most of the time they're called the black sheep. And they said some things that I find quite accurate in my own life. So I'll get to that later. I'm going to, it's a pre-recorded analysis of what occurred in my life that I'm very proud of. Looking back on it now, I realize that I was able to pull it off for my family because I was the middle child. That petition drive, with the support of our community, built and expanded Key Biscayne hardware and doubled our family's net worth. Anyway, this weekend I was up in Palm Beach Gardens. Went to PGA Boulevard. There's a Barnes & Noble there. And I wanted to meet Mark Levin for the first time. Infamous conservative constitutionalist author. He just wrote a book called Rediscovering Americanism. And, you know, he articulates the tyranny of progressivism. The progressives have gotten everything they wanted, as I've said many times on this show, and they've all failed. The founders of this country, the framers, would have been appalled at the progressive movement. They wiped away individualism, self-reliance, and basically created ridicule for federalism, where the states run the show. Now the states have very little power. They gave it all away to the federal government. Now they don't know what to do with themselves. States somehow have to take that power back and force situations where if states get it wrong, you move out of that state. So for once, Lindsey Graham has suggested that he's finally taken seriously the idea of, you know, bulk grants in the healthcare law to just send it all to the states. Let the states decide whether they want to expand Medicaid and Medicare and create their own welfare states for their citizens and see how good that does for them. But at least the damage will be done only per state, as opposed to the one, you know, one shoe fits all, the one size fits all, where it bankrupts the whole country. And as you can see, by the delays of the repeal and replace of Obamacare, you can see that the Republican parties are shaking at the knees because they got 23 million people who've got free stuff who are going to vote against them if they take away their free stuff. Something my boy Ted warned about in his filibuster that year in the Senate. So be careful what you wish for. When Republicans fail to repair this and repeal it, there's going to be hell to pay. And you don't want the left back in power. You want that day to end finally, fini. You want them to go away forever. You want them to be a minority party, you know what I mean? Like, fini. Kind of like Spider-Man, you know? I went to see Spider-Man this weekend too. In the IMAX theater. Wah, wah. With an unknown actor. Didn't even pay attention to his name. I didn't like it one bit, but a lot of people thought it was really cool. I thought it was lame. Picked it up on Facebook. Turns out that Teddy Kennedy to the Russians. And I'm going to read that whole entire article. It's pretty incredible. And it's a real harsh reality for the left to know that How can they just make up stuff and not do their own work about their own people doing similar stuff? You know, I mean, everybody knows that this happens all the time, and yet they want to make a big deal out of it. And we're just sitting there laughing, and Trump, of course, is having a field day with it because he knows it to be true. So here you go. You know, it's Kennedys. Kennedys are the root of so much misdeed and misbehavior. You know, they invented the Bill Clintons. They were basically the forebears of naughty presidencies, because John F. Kennedy, boy, was a mean bandango. He was swinging Dixie in the White House like it's going out of style. Back in those days, there was a certain amount of decency in the press. They didn't want to cover these things because they were too, you know, they were just too nasty, you know. I'm back. This is Back on the Rock, WSQF Blink Radio, where I blink once. Yes, I said it. Blink twice. Yes, you missed it. Well, this appears in Forbes magazine. It was written in 2009. It's called Ted Kennedy's Soviet Gambit. In 1991, Tim Sebastian, a reporter for the London Times, came across an arresting memorandum composed in 1983 by Viktor Cherbakov, the top man at the KGB. The memorandum was addressed to Yuri Andropov. If you remember, he was premier of the Soviet Union. And the subject was Edward Kennedy, senator from Massachusetts. On the 9th and 10th of May of this year, the May 14th memorandum explained, Senator Kennedy's close friend and trusted confidant, John Tuney, was in Moscow. Tuney was Kennedy's law school roommate and former Democratic senator from California. The senator charged Tuney to convey the following message through confidential contacts to the General Secretary of the Central Committee of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, Mr. Andropov. Kennedy's message was simple. He proposed an unabashed quid pro quo. Kennedy would lend Andropov a hand in dealing with President Reagan. In return, the Soviet leader would lend a hand to the Democratic Party in challenging Reagan for the 1984 presidential election. The only real potential threats to Reagan are problems of war and peace and Soviet-American relations, the memorandum stated. These issues, according to the senator, will without a doubt become the most important of our election campaign. Kennedy made Andropov a couple of specific offers. First, he offered to visit Moscow. In quotes, the main purpose of the meeting, according to the senator, would be to arm Soviet officials with explanations regarding problems of nuclear disarmament, so they may be better prepared and more convincing during appearances in the United States. How about that? Kennedy actually kind of reminds you of Donna Brazile giving talking points for the debate to Hillary Clinton. Well, here is Kennedy giving talking points to Andropov to negotiate against us in nuclear disarmament. This is really appalling stuff. Kennedy would help the Soviets deal with Reagan by telling them how to brush up their propaganda. Then he offered to make possible for Andropov to sit down for a few interviews on American television. Notice what I just said. Notice the next lines. Ted Kennedy, of course, has access to mainstream America media. We're all not surprised, right? If you're a Democrat and you're a senator, the media will play ball with you. Poor minds think alike. Kennedy would make certain that the networks gave Andropov airtime and that they rigged the arrangement to look like it was honest journalism. Kennedy's motives, they said, well, like other rational people, the memorandum explained, Kennedy is very troubled by the current state of Soviet-American relations. But the high-minded concern represented only one of Kennedy's motives. Tuney, in quotations, remarked that the senator wants to run for president in 1988. The memorandum continued. Kennedy, Ted, does not discount that during the 1984 campaign, the Democratic Party may officially turn to him to lead the fight against the Republicans and elect their candidate president. Kennedy proved eager to deal with Andropov, the leader of the Soviet Union and former director of the KGB, and a principal mover in both the crushing of the 1956 Hungarian Revolution and the suppression of the 1968 Prague Spring Uprising, at least in part to advance his own political prospects. In 1992, Tim Sebastian published a story about the memorandum in the London Times. Here in the US, Sebastian's story received no attention whatsoever. In his 2006 book called The Crusader, Ronald Reagan and the Fall of Communism, historian Paul Kegner reprinted the memorandum in full. It said, the media, Krager says, ignored the revelations. The document, Kenger continues, has stood the test of time. It scrutinized it more carefully than anything else I've ever dealt with as a scholar. I showed the document to numerous authorities who deal with the Soviet archives and materials. No one has debunked the memorandum or shown it to be a forgery. Kennedy's office did not deny it either. Why bring this up now? No evidence exists that Andropov ever acted on the memorandum. Within 8 months, the Soviet leader would be dead. And now that Kennedy himself has died, even many of his former senator's opponents find themselves grieving. Yet precisely because Kennedy represented such a commanding figure, perhaps the most compelling liberal of our day, we need to consider his record in full. Doing so, it turns out, requires pondering a document in the archives of the Politburo. When President Reagan chose to confront the Soviet Union, calling it the evil empire it was Senator Edward Kennedy who chose to offer aid and comfort the General Secretary, Andropov. On the Cold War, the greatest issue of our time, Kennedy got it wrong. So there you have it, gentlemen and ladies, Democrats alike. This is why I call them demo-commies. Can't debate it now. Go to my Facebook page, you'll see the article there. Or just Google, like I did, Ted Kennedy Andropov, and it'll come out there in Forbes. There's an article called Soviet Gambit. So what I tell you is true. The left is duplicitous. The name of their game is to steal. Plain and simple. They either steal your future, steal your legacy, or just steal your taxes. Either way, they're stealing. They want to be directors of your destiny and mine. There's nothing more, nothing less. And now look, they got 23 million people on health care getting free stuff, and they call that benevolence. It's greedy when a rich man doesn't want to pay any more taxes, right? But it's not greedy when some Democrat wants to steal it from one person to pay it to another. You know what I mean? That's not greedy when you want to steal someone else's money to give it to someone else. That's not greedy. Come on, man.